Welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. I'm John, Father John Deere, and today you're about to hear our highlights from all the 2025 podcasts. This is a project of beatitudecenter.org, where you can find many other podcasts and regular Zoom programs on the nonviolence of Jesus and practicing nonviolence and working for a more just, more nonviolent world. So let's begin with a little prayer. I just invite you to take a deep breath and relax and recenter yourself and enter into the presence of the God of peace who loves you infinitely, personally, and everyone everywhere. And let's welcome the risen nonviolent Jesus with us and ask for the grace to follow the nonviolent Jesus more faithfully in the new year and to do God's will. God of peace, thank you for all the blessings of life and love and peace that you give us. Bless us, inspire us, disarm us, strengthen us, and send us out to do your will, to do our part to help end poverty, racism, greed and war, injustice, nuclear weapons, fascism, environmental destruction, that we might follow the nonviolent Jesus ever more faithfully and be your holy peacemakers and welcome your reign of universal love, nonviolence, and peace on earth. Amen. Merry Christmas, everyone. So it's the end of 2025, and in this episode, we're offering highlights from all the many podcasts we've recorded this year. Let me first begin by thanking my team, Rob Vermeulen, the engineer, and Leanne Vermeulen, the producer, for all their hard work this year and for planning this special episode. Let me also thank the Beatitude Center board, our great administrative assistant, Cassandra Sousa, and our great techie, Garrett Matsura. Of course, there's no way we could really edit together a sort of greatest hits because there was so much packed in these episodes. Let me do suggest, if you haven't already, to go back and listen to the episodes you've missed, or if you haven't really heard any of them, binge on all of them. And the best place is just to go back to beatitudecenter.org to the podcast page, and there you will find a complete list of all the episodes and the guests, and all you have to do is click on one, and it starts playing. So here are a few samples of the wonderful people who have taught us, inspired us, encouraged us, and offered us hope to keep on following the nonviolent Jesus this year. Enjoy. Martin Sheen is one of our most celebrated award-winning actors from movies such as Apocalypse Now, Gandhi, Selma, The American President, Gettysburg, The Way, Badlands, and many more, and of course the star of the TV series The West Wing, where he played President Bartlet. But Martin is also perhaps the most committed activist celebrity who's been speaking out against war, injustice, homelessness, nuclear weapons, and advocating for justice, disarmament, and peace for many, many, many decades. Hello, Martin, and welcome to my Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, John. Thank you for that beautiful prayer and introduction. I'm delighted to be with you. It is a journey, yeah, and I don't have any advice to give anyone except to just continue
That's good. Yeah.
to stay in touch with that deeply personal, nonviolent Jesus. Because if it's not personal, if Jesus is not personal, he's impersonal to us. And if he's impersonal,
I was going to ask you about that. Let me ask you, because you said that at Philip Berrigan's funeral. It was amazing. We remember we were marching, and it was a cold, rainy day following the casket, and there were 1,000 of us, and we were going to the funeral. Yeah. And Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Was interviewing you, and I was standing next to you. And you said, so what did you think about Philip Berrigan, who spent, by the way, folks, 11 years of his life in prison for protesting war? And you said, without missing a beat to Amy Goodman, well, Phil took the gospel personally. I never heard anybody say that before. And it's so obvious. That's what you're just saying again now. Do you agree still? You think
Yeah. I think if we don't take it personal, it's impersonal. And if it's impersonal, so what? Who cares? The phrase I use is, we have to find a way to unite the will of the Spirit to the work of the flesh. And that to me is peacemaking.
That
great. To me is my real Catholic faith. That is where I meet the God of nonviolence. That is where it gets real personal for me, is that effort to unite the will of the Spirit to the work of the flesh. And when you find that, the saying is, like Teodisha Dan said, when we find out how deeply we are loved, we have discovered fire for the second time.
Oh, that's great.
And I use that phrase in trying to inspire people when I speak publicly about the journey that we're all called to, and that is we're challenged to find something in our lives worth fighting for, something deeply personal and uncompromising, something that unites the will of the Spirit to the work of the flesh. And when we find that, we have discovered fire for the second time.
Sister Helen Prejean is one of the world's most beloved Catholic leaders and prophetic voices, a sister of St. Joseph of Madai. She's one of the world's leading voices against the death penalty. She's the author of the best-selling book, Dead Man Walking. Sister Helen Prejean, welcome to my new podcast on the Nonviolent Jesus.
Hey, this is very exciting, John. I'm really glad to be a part of this.
Thank you.
Forgiveness is perceived as weakness, just like mercy is perceived as weakness. What, you're going to have mercy? The John Wayne Jesus comes in there and says, no, watch this, man, I'm getting even. And that's the whole Rambo thing that has come to us. But what is entailed in forgiving your enemy? If it's not weakness, what is it? And the way Lloyd LeBlanc put it was, after his son was murdered, he was consumed with anger. He wanted to kill with his own bare hands Pat Saunier and his brother who had killed his son. But here's what he noticed. He kept praying, see, Jesus, you got to help me, because he knew he wasn't in alignment with what Jesus wanted of him in his life and his own good heart. He knew he wasn't in alignment with eternal life. And he kept praying. And then when the prayer was answered, the way it was answered in him was that he realized that his own anger was eating him alive. And when he came to this realization with the grace that was with it, he put up his hand toward me like a stop, like this. And then he said, they killed my son, but I'm not going to let them kill me. Because if I let this anger keep going inside of me, I'm going to die. I'm already dying. I'm making my wife cry. I'm neglecting my daughter, Vicky. And he came to it as this understanding, this deep compassion, that these were human beings. They had done this to his son, but that he was not going to lose his life because of it. And he was the only one in the town that showed compassion to the mother of Pat and Eddie Saunier, Gladys Saunier, who lived in this little town of St. Martinville. He appears at her front door one day, and he's got a basket of fruit, and he hands it to her, and he said, Miss Saunier, I know you're having a tough time in this town, but I want you to know I'm a parent just like you, and we never know really completely all our children might do, and I don't hold you responsible for the death of David, our son. And here, these are for you. And he gave her a basket of fruit.
Father Richard Rohr is a beloved Franciscan priest, best-selling author, speaker, and founder of the New Jerusalem community in Cincinnati. Back in 1971 and in 1987, he founded the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So, Richard, thank you so much for all the great work you do and for joining me today on this new podcast. You're very welcome.
I'm honored, and it's easy to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
I said, let me tell you a secret. And I'd say it as clearly as I could. I'm convinced that most men, even those who think they're angry, are really sad. And the room would come to a hushed recognition that was so consistent over those many years. It was almost like the turning point in the initiation rite. Maybe I'm not as angry as I think I am. But the trouble is, we dualistically then thought all anger was inherently wrong. And that wasn't what I was trying to say. I think, like the prophets, it's pretty appropriate to begin with anger. If you aren't angry today at Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, the state of mental health and family relationships, you're not looking. But the trouble is, it can't stay there. It's like I always probably say obsessively, it's both and. You have to begin with anger, but it has to morph into a deeper realization, which is pathos or pity or sadness or what Jeremiah calls lamentation.
Some of us are guilty, but all of us are responsible. Isn't that
Great
helpful?
line.
Isn't that great?
Great line.
What does that
yes.
mean for you, for us now? I know that's a basic question, but I want to hear you unpack
it. I think Jesus came to represent solidarity with human suffering and even solidarity with human stupidity. Not the illusion that we privately could overcome it. That created a religion of purity codes and an obsession with being pure and not evil, denial of the shadow. And soon we became so practiced at denying the shadow that we literally can't see it. It's good.
It's my great pleasure to welcome today my friend, Sister Joan Chittister, to reflect together on Jesus and the Beatitudes. As many listeners know, Sister Joan is an internationally known lecturer and teacher, a columnist for the National Catholic Reporter, and the author of some 60 books, including The Time Is Now, Becoming Fully Human, Radical Spirit, The Gift of Years, and The Rule of Benedict. She has served as Benedictine Prioress of the Benedictine Sisters of Erie and Benedictine Federation President, the President of the Leadership Council of Women Religious, and co-chair of the Global Peace Initiative of Women. And I urge everyone to check out her website, joanchittister.org. So welcome this morning, Sister Joan. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, you are the little brother of my life, John. I've always hoped with the hope that they would give the two of us the time just to share the ideas that we've picked up, both of us, crossing the country and deepening the Catholic heart.
Oh, we get to do
and
it
you
now.
have done that, John. You know more people in the church than the church knows. And as long as they know you, they're going to be happy and be loved.
Thank you.
So thank you for allowing me to be part of this. I seeing God very, very easy anymore, John. It's in every perfect rose. It's in every crying child. It's in every old woman and her last breath. God is manifest in the breath and the presence of everything we see. The problem is we miss the portrait. We don't know what we're seeing.
Yeah.
There is no other answer. That God is present. What is, we are the ones who are not present to the God who is with us. Any good contemplative order will tell you that every single day. One day, some years ago, if all my sisters were here, they would tell me. All I know is that I had a program up, and I got this far, and the people, I said, build your own happiness group. That's what we're supposed to be. That's what little parishes are supposed to be. Little happiness groups, for heaven's sakes. So I said, get one. And when I hung up, I did it myself. I went on. I knew there were a group of people on. I said, you should all. You should all be doing something together now after we've done this. And then I said something like this. I'll tell you what, come back next Wednesday. We'll have something for you. That's when Mary Lou and I created Monasteries of the Heart, to which 30,000 people still now connect.
Well, it's my great pleasure today to welcome my friend Bryan McLaren to reflect with us on following the nonviolent Jesus in a time of rising authoritarianism. And so with the growth of Christian nationalism, oligarchy, fascism, here at home under the Trump administration, with the Republican Party and Fox News, as well as around the world, it's really great to welcome you, Bryan, to help us understand the nonviolent Jesus in light of this, how he dealt with it in his day and how we can respond today. Bryan McLaren is, I think, one of the greatest scripture scholars and theologians in the world. He spent 24 years as a pastor in a local congregation in Washington, D.C., and his life and ministry changed when, as a young evangelical pastor, he realized that he was called to be a follower of Jesus, not simply a follower of the Bible or a theological system or religious hierarchy. And wow, Bryan, doesn't that make all the difference?
I think we're all going to have to keep our eyes open and listen for the people who are organizing. And, anything you organize, I want to be part of because I trust you so much. And those of us who are organizing together, and we're going to have to keep our ears open for the right time to do the right thing.
That's
there
beautiful.
are times when Jesus is in the middle of a huge crowd and he disappears from the crowd. I think he knows this is not the right time for me to get killed quite yet, and it's not because he's afraid. It's because he has a strategy. But when the time comes, he goes to Jerusalem and basically says, okay, this is it. This is time for the life or death confrontation. When you look at Jesus, he's like the absolute inverse of an authoritarian leader. Instead of using fear, he invites people toward faith, hope, and love. Instead of radically dividing society, he creates tables and spaces where we welcome everybody and we show love and respect for everybody. Instead of gross distortion of and diversion from the truth, he consistently spoke the truth, even when it was painful. And he often understood that if he spoke the truth directly, nobody would even listen. So he often spoke the truth indirectly through parables and other masterful communication techniques to get around the biases that are so deeply ingrained in people. And then instead of the suppression of dissent, he was an agent of dissent. He organized public demonstrations to show an alternative, non-authoritarian, nonviolent way of life.
So it's my great pleasure to welcome today and introduce everybody to the legendary Bryan Stevenson, lawyer, founder, and executive director of Equal Justice Initiative, also professor of law at New York University Law School, and author of the great best-selling book Just Mercy, which is also made into a terrific movie of the same name, which I hope everybody will go and see the movie and read the book. I thought we could just start, Bryan, by you giving us your take on what's happening right now in Alabama and the country in whatever way you want to talk about it.
Well, thank you. I do think we are in a moment where the politics of fear and anger are raging. They are raging in this country, but they're raging all around the world. And what's scary about that is that when societies allow themselves to be governed by fear and anger, they start tolerating things we should never tolerate. We start accepting things we should never accept. When you look at human history, in the worst moments of human history, you can evaluate what happened during those tragic moments and find at the core narratives of fear and anger shaping behavior, shaping policies, shaping the functioning of government. The Holocaust can't be understood without understanding how the Nazis used narratives of fear and anger and directed them at people who are Jewish or people who are gay or people who were Roma to create this horrific violence and destruction. 30 years ago, we saw a genocide in Rwanda where hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and the narratives of fear and anger spread through that country, and just unconscionable things happened. When I look at American history, the parts of our history, the moments in our history when we did the most destructive things, we're being guided by those same narratives of fear and anger. And we're in the midst of that now. We have elected leaders that want everybody angry, that want everybody fearful. And that has put us in this valley that I think you have rightly described as a really troubling time. And so for me, what that means is that those of us who don't want to give in to fear and anger have to become hopeful and courageous. We have to become faithful truth tellers. We have to stand when people say sit down. We have to speak when people say be quiet. The encouraging thing to me about this moment is that we've seen this before. I'm the heir of people who were enslaved in America, the grandson of people who were terrorized during the period of lynching, the child of people who were brutalized by segregation. And my foreparents found a way to cope, to survive, to endure, and to resist these narratives of fear and anger. I started my education in the colored school. They didn't let me go to the public schools. When I got to the public schools after integration, the presumption was I wasn't equipped, wasn't capable, wasn't worthy to be there. And you had to navigate a lot of those presumptions. I think we're better positioned than we've ever been before to overcome these narratives of fear and anger, but it's going to require some work. It's going to require some faith. It's going to require some activism. It's going to require some believing in our capacity to do better than what we're seeing in this particular moment. For me, and I wrote in Just Mercy about how going to death row when I was a law student completely changed me. Meeting a condemned man on death row, sitting down with him and forgetting that I was a law student and forgetting that he was a condemned prisoner, and just talking to him for 2 or 3 hours, and then getting lost in his humanity and the fellowship we were creating in that horrid space, and then having that visit interrupted by guards who were angry that we were laughing and talking and bonding, and came into the room and grabbed him and put the handcuffs back on his wrist and wrapped the chain around his waist and put the metal shackles on his ankles so violently and started shoving him toward the door. And to see him treated so badly and not be able to stop that mistreatment really alarmed me. But then he got in front of the door before he left that room, and he turned to me and he said, "Bryan, don't worry about this. You just come back." And then he did that thing I'll never forget, where he closed his eyes, threw his head back, and began to sing. And he started singing the hymn, "I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I'm onward bound." And then he said, "Lord, plant my feet on higher ground." And it stunned everyone. The guards stopped. And then they recovered and started pushing him down the hallway. And you could hear the chains clanging, but you could hear this man singing about higher ground. Hearing his song was like a calling from God. I knew then that I wanted to help condemned people get to higher ground. and being proximate to this condemned man and hearing his song changed everything for me. I went back to Harvard Law School. You couldn't get me out of the law school library. I needed to know everything about habeas corpus and res judicata and comity and federalism and all of the jurisprudence necessary to help condemned people. But if I'm honest, if I've helped anybody during my career, it's because I got close to a condemned man and heard his song. And I still believe, Father, that in jails and prisons, people are singing. In places where people are marginalized and excluded, in places where people have been oppressed and ignored and mistreated, there are songs still being sung. And if we get close enough to hear those melodies, to hear the humanity, to hear God's grace manifest in the lives of the poor and those who are disfavored, we find power, we find strength, we find knowledge, we find wisdom, we find the capacity to make a difference. And that is what has sustained me in Alabama, in my work, is that relationship to God's children who are often neglected, pushed aside, condemned, incarcerated, forgotten.
Well, dear friends, listeners, it's a great pleasure and a great blessing to welcome my friend, the esteemed Dr. Cornel West, here with us. Like millions of others, I consider Cornel West the leading public intellectual in the United States, maybe the world. For me, he's right up there with Emerson and W.E.B. Du Bois. Welcome, Brother Cornel West, to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
Well, my dear brother, I want to begin by saluting you.
I wanted to begin by asking you just to talk about it all, your take on what we're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it out there, though, brother. But as you know, I mean, any empire has been about 70 of them since the beginning of the species. United States number 68. They come and go. They peak. They begin to decay and decline, usually as a result of military outreach. We've got 800 military units around the world facilitating genocide right now in Gaza, pulling back in many ways and still indirectly connected to genocide in Sudan. Usually the empires began to connect that military overreach with corruption of elites across the board, not just political parties, but of upper classes and wealthy classes who begin to view life as a gold rush and therefore end up worshiping the golden calf and transform the golden rule to he who has the gold will rule, and think that chickens won't come home to roost, or think that somehow you're not going to reap what you sow. So it then is connected to an impotence, a sense of powerlessness and helplessness among the citizenry. And that's how they end up out of deep frustration and desperation, calling for a strong man, a tyrant, a fascist, a authoritarian figure, a dictator, whatever language you want to use. But the last thing has to do with a spiritual and moral vacuum, a spiritual and moral emptiness, which means that the citizenry find it more and more difficult to be in contact with the best of what has gone into them historically, communally, religiously, intellectually. That's one of the reasons why the Martin Kings and Dorothy Days and Philip and Daniel Berrigans and so forth are not household words, because they represent the best of the history of the American empire. And it's hard for people to get in contact with their lives, their witnesses, their sacrifice, their visions, their words, their utterances. And so people end up having to choose between a number of options that have little to do with the best of the history of their own country, the history of their own empire, the history of their own religions, or whatever traditions they're a part of. That's the makings of the collapse of an empire. And that's what we are witnessing, the collapse and implosion of the American empire in real time. And of course, Trump himself is a major factor, but he's as much a sign and a symptom. He's not the cause of it. The cause is the organized greed. The cause is the weaponized hatred. The cause is the institutionalized indifference toward the least of these. You remember Rabbi Hester used to say what? Indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. That reinforces the unbelievable levels of the spiritual wickedness, especially in high places. And so we have to try to just tell the truth about where we are, but recognize that it's not really new. I mean, it's already at work in Melville's Moby Dick with Ahab, right? You got the ship, it's multiracial, the Queepod, you've got the unbelievable obsession with the whiteness of the whale and white supremacy itself, tied to empire, tied to predatory capitalist processes. It's tied to very patriarchal and homophobic and transphobic sensibilities that lose sight of the rich sanctity and holiness and dignity of human beings made in the image of a living and loving God. Melville saw it way back in 1851. Americans ought to know about their witness, know about their courage. Very, very difficult to keep these traditions alive. But that's what you've been able to do in your life, and that's what you do in this broadcast. But in the end, we should never be surprised by evil or paralyzed by despair, though, brother. Even when we tell the truth about just how ugly the situation is, we're blues. We blues people. We're blues Christians. Blues is about what? Telling the truth about catastrophe, understanding the cross as the ultimate catastrophe, but knowing catastrophe or the cross do not have the last word. To be a follower of Jesus means to take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow him. Give everything inside of you that's been poured into you at your best, which is the love, the courage, the integrity, the honesty, focusing on the least of these, knowing that the world will view you as foolish, that through the lens of the dominant tendencies of the world, you'll always be viewed as foolish. Erasmus is right in praise of folly. Yes, it is foolish to follow a Palestinian Jew named Jesus that tells you to lead with love, that tells you to love your way through the darkness, the cruelty, the coldness of the world. So you're in the world, but not of the world, that you're not conformed, but transformed by something bigger than you, a grace that is given to you, a legacy, a tradition, and memories of those who were part of the same love train you trying to stay on. We shall never forget him and the movement, and we shall never cave in, give up, or sell our souls for a mess of pottage. That's what persists in the best of those of us who still have the audacity to be followers of a Palestinian Jew named Jesus.
Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome and introduce everyone to my friend, Reverend Emmanuel Charles McCarthy, one of the world's greatest teachers of Christian nonviolence.
My understanding, John, of nonviolence is that nonviolence is an adjective or an adverb. It is not a noun in the Gospels. Nonviolence is the modifier of what saves, which is love. Love modeled on Jesus, love exemplified by Jesus, love. Now, therefore, when people ask me for a definition of nonviolence, what I mean by it, I say, what I mean always is nonviolent love as modeled by Jesus, which means, modeled by Jesus in the gospel, which means it's a nonviolent love, not just of my family, not just of my next door neighbor. It's a nonviolent love of friends and enemies, regardless of where they are or who they are. And I kind of, supplement that by saying the fact of the matter is Jesus in the Gospels extends the word neighbor, love of neighbor, that's in the Old Testament. He extends it out to all human beings who are sons and daughters of the Father. So nonviolence is, for me, is nonviolent love of friends and enemies in the model of Jesus in the Gospels. So is it Christ-like love that is imbuing, moving, motivating the particular action that is called nonviolence? Or if someone else wants to say this is nonviolent without that, that they can do that. But for me, if the action is not motivated and imbued with Christ-like love, it is not going to be effective in countering evil and death and their multiplicity of manifestations in this world.
It's a great pleasure to welcome my friend, Professor Stanley Hauerwas, one of the world's greatest theologians and ethicists. In 2001, Time magazine named Stanley Hauerwas America's best theologian. Stanley, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's so good to be with you, John.
Thank you.
The Mennonites help me see that it's not like we have Jesus and then we might think about what implications there might be about nonviolence. Jesus is nonviolence, and to be a worshiper of Christ is to be shaped by a cross that is the manifestation of God's love for the enemy in a way that makes it possible for us to live with an enemy that we must say, you can kill us, but you cannot determine the meaning of our death, because the meaning of our death has been substantiated by Christ's cross and resurrection. These are deep issues theologically that the church only gestures toward, unfortunately, rather than makes integral to the kind of formation that we all must receive for the worship of God.
Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome my friend John Fugelsang, one of our great broadcasters, comedians, and speakers. He has acted on CSI, hosted many TV shows and podcasts. Memorably, I first caught you, John, when you hosted that, I think it was a V8 show with Paul McCartney in the mid-'90s. And the famous last public appearance of our hero, George Harrison, as well. John has just published his first book. Congratulations. Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds, from Simon & Schuster. John Fugelsang, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and with your audience. I really appreciate it. God commands the Israelites to welcome the stranger, commands the Hebrews to treat the alien as one of your own. Christ shows up in Matthew 25 and says individuals and nations will be judged by how they welcome the stranger. I'm not saying we shouldn't have any standards on who enters the country. To me, it's all about the criminalization of migrants. I don't call them illegals. I call them Christian refugees because it's true and it upsets the right people. But go ahead and make them argue with God. Don't get angry with your xenophobic uncle at Thanksgiving. Just say, well, God says this, Jesus says this. Why should I listen to you and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and reject the words of God and Jesus? Why are God and Jesus wrong? Let them argue with the scripture. So I wrote the book for all the nice Christians out there who are tired of seeing the religion hijacked.
Thank you.
And because also, if I may, because the media is not going to take it back. No. The media is never going to ask tough questions. They'll never ask any of these homophobes, where does Jesus drive the gay wedding cakes out of the temple? And the Democratic Party is going to be too terrified to ever stand up and say the truth, which is there's no possible way you can follow both Donald Trump and Jesus unless you've neither read either one of their books. So it's up to us. And like all social movements of justice, it's going to come from people working together, one heart and one mind at a time. These people are going to try to wage war, create dominance for themselves on earth, and they're using Jesus as their camouflage. So I mainly wrote this book to be a guide to camouflage removal, because you don't get to inflict violence to solve problems. And it's another reason why it was very strange to write this book about how to take down Christian nationalism and racism with nonviolence and humor in Scripture. The same week we see somebody use a bullet to take down one of the most famous Christian nationalists and bigots in our society. And it just broke my heart, John, because I've dealt with Charlie Kirk. He came at me. I'll never claim that he was fighting for the gospel. His many, many racist statements and cruel statements are out there. I don't need to recount them all. Your listeners can Google the very real things this man said and the delight he took in the suffering and violence towards others. But on the flip side, we had so many friends on the left who were just celebrating this disgusting violence because Nazis deserve it. And how do I embrace that? I said so many horrible, vulgar things when I was younger, John. I made so many mistakes. I said so many things that I thought was righteous and powerful and strong that were actually cruel and stupid. And I got lucky that I got to grow old and be lame. Charlie Kirk is never going to get to grow old. He's never going to get to lose debates, have his heart opened. He's never going to get to have a black friend or a gay friend or a transgender friend or an immigrant friend. He's not going to get to see Trumpism fail and be humbled by losing a lot of debates and losing his funding. He's going to be locked in that immature place.
Well, it's a pleasure to welcome Paul Chappell today to our podcast. Paul is an international peace educator and founder of Peace Literacy. He graduated from West Point, was deployed to Iraq, left active duty as a captain, then realizing that, as he says, humanity is facing new challenges that require us to become as well-trained in waging peace as soldiers are in waging war. He founded Peace Literacy to help students and adults from all backgrounds work toward their full potential as peacemakers for a more peaceful world. So Peace Literacy teaches that peace is not merely a goal, but a practical skill set. Paul, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
Thank you, John, for having me. Thank you so much. Something we talk about is how humans have this natural aversion. We have a natural aversion to hurting and killing other humans. So we have a natural aversion to hurting and killing other humans, and all of military history shows that this is how we are. Every war, every genocide, every form of slavery, they all require dehumanization. There's never been a war, never been a form of slavery, never been a genocide that hasn't used dehumanization, as you know. And the purpose of dehumanization is to protect the mind from feeling guilt and remorse. If we hurt people and we think that they're like us, we'll feel guilty, we'll feel remorseful. And so dehumanization's purpose is to protect the mind from feeling that. If we don't teach people peace literacy, if we don't teach people nonviolence, and we're teaching people the opposite, I mean, that's not going to be a good outcome, right? And I think a lot of people got complacent. They just thought that peace is inevitable. We talk a lot about how war is not inevitable. We talk about how humans are not naturally violent, yet humans can become incredibly violent through trauma and other forms of trauma, manipulation, things like that can propel people into extremely violent behavior. And we aren't teaching people any of these tools or skills. We're teaching people the opposite, and we're seeing the consequences of that. So just as the idea that war is inevitable is very dangerous, the idea that peace is inevitable is also very dangerous. People think, well, we're just on this trajectory toward a more peaceful and just world. It's all written in stone. We don't have to do anything. And we're just going to have a more peaceful world. It's just going to be an inevitable result of just the forces of history, when we really have to do something to push humanity in that direction. And so what's happening now are things that I thought were going to happen for a number of years. I mean, in March of 2016, I was telling people I thought Donald Trump would win at least 2 terms. And when he lost, I thought he was going to win in 2020. But when he lost in 2020, I was saying, I never said they were going to be consecutive terms. I think he's going to win in 2024. And I think that there are traumas and pains and there are hungers in our society that aren't being addressed and that are being ignored and neglected. And there's an appetite for things that we aren't addressing in a way that's going to help deal with those root causes. So if we don't teach peace and don't teach peace literacy and don't teach nonviolence, right, this is necessary for human survival. And if what we're seeing in the world today doesn't show that, I'm not sure what does. But I really think there are explainable causes for why we're doing what we're doing, and there is a path out of it. And so if we can predict behavior and we understand why that behavior is happening, and we have a path out of it, that leaves me hopeful. And it doesn't matter how bad things seem to get, there is a path. And I think going back to what you asked just about nonviolence is the deeper knowing, the deeper depths of understanding and knowing, where you not just you see, but you feel, you know, in this deeper way, the dignity of human life and animal life. It uplifts you. It uplifts everyone around you. The path of trauma is just a dead-end road to misery. It doesn't uplift anyone. It hurts people around you. This is the path out of the pain and the madness that people feel. And succumbing to rage and mistrust and alienation, it's not good for you. It's not good for anyone around you. It's not good for the country. It's not good for the world. So the fact that nonviolence helps people and uplifts people, this is the path that we need to take, and people can benefit from it as they move through that process.
It's a great pleasure to welcome today my friend Kathy Kelly, longtime peace activist, author, and Nobel Peace Prize nominee. As we record this, Kathy is participating in and helping to coordinate a 40-day fast for an end to the U.S.-backed Israeli genocide in Gaza. Welcome, my friend Kathy Kelly.
Well, thank you, John. I'm so glad that your podcasts are reaching many people and that your commitment to being a practitioner of nonviolence, following the Nonviolent Jesus, still reaches me. Thank you. Well, I think about how Pope Francis truly was a symbol of unity for Christians and others all throughout the world. And I see Pope Leo entering in that direction as well. But for instance, here in New York, we've gone to every Sunday gone to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and you don't hear the hierarchs in New York speaking out. So it's really dependent on people in the pews to say, look, we do follow the nonviolent Jesus, and we will speak out, even if the people appointed to lead us are themselves perhaps not so able to do that for whatever reasons of compromised conscience they might have. So I think the line that it's important to remember is that the means you use determines the end you get. And if you use means of silence or indifference or changing the subject, then that's what you'll get in the end, indifference and silence. But if we use means that are kindly, compassionate, but very determined, then I think we can reach an end similar to what happened with South Africa. Eventually, the nations of the world were able to say to the South African apartheid government, you can no longer participate in the family of nations. And then Nelson Mandela was released from prison. So we're hoping that that sort of playbook would be reenacted, that the countries of the world will, out of frustration, but also out of conscience, say to the United States and Israel, if Israel keeps flouting international law, the countries of the world can't afford to see the edifice of international law chipped away at because a few countries refuse to abide by it. When Jesus was in the temple and he went to the money changers who were supporting oppression of ordinary Palestinians and particularly poor Palestinians, he turned over that table. And I think that we could turn over the tables if we became more linked together. And that's not so easy always, but we can find the kindred spirits and say, all right, let's together say we're not going to allow that table to be upright and find nonviolent ways to turn it over. And that means that we find who we can link up with and keep on looking for those kindred spirits and build those relationships, believing that ours is to plant the seeds, and it may be for another generation to reap the harvest.
A Roman Catholic sister of social service, Sister Simone is a religious leader, attorney, author, and recipient of the 2022 Presidential Medal of Freedom. Sister Simone Campbell, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
Oh, great to be with you. We need everyone. We need everyone involved. And so, but the question is, what is your piece to do? And that's where prayer, where meditation becomes so important. Listen for the wee small voice inside of what is your piece to do. Everyone has a piece that needs doing in this time. What's yours? Listen for it and then act on it. It starts with a contemplative practice, quite frankly. I mean, this is how it works for me. A contemplative practice, which is about listening, deep listening to the needs of the time and just being present. And then acting on what I hear. And what it has led me to is what I call holy curiosity. Holy curiosity is wanting to understand the other. It can be hopeless if we don't respond. But for me, it really is critically connected to touching the pain of the world as real.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
Well, John, I feel like I've finally made it by getting on your podcast, and thank you for having me, man. We're in the fight of our lives, and we have been since the beginning of this nightmare. Democracy is the precondition for freedom, and then democracy itself is not just a static collection of rules and procedures and rights. Democracy is a project, and it's an unfinished draft always. Democracy is always moving forward. You know, Tocqueville said in Democracy in America that democracy and voting rights in our country are either shrinking and shriveling away or they're growing and expanding. And we've clearly been in this terrible contractionary mode with the Supreme Court dismantling the Voting Rights Act and so many voter suppression and disenfranchisement mechanisms being adopted by the GOP all over the country. We've got to get back on the growth track for democracy. As Dr. King said, in his speech in Memphis before his death, he said, "All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper." And so we do have those organizing ideals and values that we try to validate through social and political struggle. And that's why I say democracy is not just a system of rules and rights and values, which it is, but it is also an unfinished draft. It is a process in motion. It's a project, and we're all invested in it.
As things continue to get worse and are collapsing, that nonviolence is needed now more than ever. I mean, even with the threats of nuclear weapons and catastrophic climate change. I wondered if you might say a word or two about the role of people who are teaching and promoting and strategizing and organizing along Kingian nonviolence and Christian nonviolence, and how important that is everywhere in this country as it's collapsing.
Well, I think that's the whole thing. And that's why I love your work so much. I mean, I think this is the essence of it. I mean, democracy and the rule of law, which supports democracy, which supports in turn freedom. Democracy is the system which relies on nonviolent verbal expression and conflict resolution as opposed to violent assault. And at least so I would argue, and so you would argue, and I think everybody who wants our best religious traditions to be embodied in political democracy. Every day when I was growing up, my father used to say, when everything looks hopeless, you're the hope. And so everybody go out there and be the hope for other people who need you.
Today I'm speaking with my friend, the legendary singer and activist Joan Baez. She's been against all wars and injustices because she has a lifetime commitment to nonviolence. So, dear Joan Baez, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
I hope I live up to that introduction.
Great.
When I was 16, we started meeting with Ira Sandpearl on first day, on Sunday, like Sunday school. And the thoughts I had, they began to form. He had us reading Gandhi and reading Lao Tzu and eventually Huxley. And so it was opening my mind to all of it, always in the context of the Quakers and nonviolence. So I never stepped out of that. I have another quote for you.
Good.
It's T.S. Eliot.
Yeah.
For us, there's only the trying, and the rest is not our business. I felt completely at home with King, and I met him when there was a gathering of high school students, and it was an annual affair, and it's my first time there, and they always had a speaker, and this year it was King. And I started to cry at the beginning of the speech. I cried all the way through, and because this was a man who was doing what I've been reading about. He was doing what I've been thinking about and reading about. I have a short fuse, and I don't hurt anybody, but I get pissed off instantly and attempt to keep my mouth shut. And I'm not very good at a peaceful response. As I say, I keep it to myself.
Well, that's peaceful then. You're not responding.
You're going to try to get me
violently.
out of this. I know you're going to try and get me out of whatever feet I have in my mouth, but I'm not cut out. It's an effort for me part of me is absolutely all the things that you say, because I came to it early. And because even as a kid, I didn't like the quiet time with the Quakers. That meditation has stayed with me all through my life, and is a very, very important part of my life.
I'd love you to read the new poem. This is something you've written recently, right?
This is recently. This is called This Is Not Optimism. It says, I just wasted a day and a half writing a long-winded response to the question, are you an optimist? Really? In this shitstorm? Are you kidding me? The simple answer is no, I've never been an optimist. Does that mean I ever gave up the fight against tyranny? No, I never did. Most likely never will. I used to be a pessimist until someone suggested it was a waste of time, so I'm trying to quit. Being an optimist may be a waste of time too, but at least it's less depressing. Be an activist instead. Carry your light out into this shitstorm. Keep your eyes on the prize and shout, glory, hallelujah. Goodness will prevail. This is not optimism. This is a dance. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let the administration turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let the administration turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on singing, keep on swinging, marching up to freedom land.
Thank you, dear friends, for listening to this special year-end episode of the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. You can hear all the year's podcasts and find other upcoming podcasts and Zoom programs at beatitudecenter.org. And please consider offering a donation to support this free work. Don't miss our many other upcoming great podcasts, including my conversation with Reverend Andrew Young for the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. May the God of peace bless you all. Keep on following the nonviolent Jesus as we go forward into the new year. And Merry Christmas.